Shorting electric vehicles, this time on Right Angle. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green. This episode of Right Angle brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal on December 18th that Akio Toyoda, with a D, who is the president of the Toyota Motor Company, named after his family, sort of, has said that there is a silent majority in the industry of automakers that don't believe that they should go all in exclusively on electric vehicles. And he said they're a silent majority who fear speaking out. And the reason for that is, and I'll read the quote, because the right, here it is. No, it's not the quote. Let me get the right quote. Here he is. They think that it, meaning electric vehicles, going all in on electric vehicles, they think that it's the trend, so they can't speak out loud. And the story notes a couple of car companies that have already made commitments to have complete lineup of nothing but electric vehicles by a particular date certain. There are 2 or 3 major automakers who've already committed to that. And he said Toyota's not going to do that. Because he thinks that they should explore all options, including hybrid vehicles, including hydrogen vehicles, and who knows what else thereafter. And Bill Whittle, I thought this was interesting because one of my favorite lines from the story, and it says a lot of wise things, but he said, look, the automakers need the profits from gasoline engines to be able to do the research, development, and production setup for more experimental things like electric cars with smaller batteries and frankly, finding enduring sources of battery material, which is in a shortage state, or they're perceiving it's going to be in a shortage state very soon. Electric vehicles are 6.5% of the new car market right now, but that's skewed by California. That has really been driven by an outsized purchasing by Californians. There's one Illinois car dealer who says that, yes, there's interest in electric vehicles, and he attributes that primarily due to the shortage thereof. And so people are always wanting what they can't have. But he says, quote, "Is it more than 10 to 15% of our customer base? No way." And so this is a guy standing up in the middle of the auto industry, and it's Toyota. So this is the big cheese on the auto industry.
They're saying, number one, yeah.
Listen, maybe nobody else wants to say this, but if you go all in on electric vehicles, you're making a huge mistake.
You know, if you were to present electric vehicles, I personally, I'm one of the fans of those exotic gasoline-powered vehicles personally. But if you were to lay all this stuff out on a table, right, before any of it had been invented and said, okay, here's the benefits of one thing, here's the benefits of the other thing, I think the internal combustion gasoline engine would win virtually all of those categories. The thing that, well, first of all, in terms of being skewed by California, all you need to know about the state of California is on the day that they said, we will mandate that every car sold in this state will be electric by 2035, I think was the date.
Yeah.
That same day, they released an announcement saying you must cut back your power usage because we do not have enough electrical power to run the grid. So turn set your thermostats higher in the summer and so on. This is what we believe. We did an episode where somebody did the calculation and said that you had to build a gigawatt powered plant. Was it per week, per month, per day, in order to meet the expected demand of this?
I think per
but here's
week,
one thing
yeah.
about Here's one thing about electric cars that I haven't seen very many people talk about, and that is charging time, right? You go to a gas station and you fill up your car. That might be if it's a big car, it might be a 7, 8, 10-minute adventure, right? But if you go to a charging station, you're there for 45 minutes. And forget about the inconvenience of waiting there for 45 minutes. Think about the throughput issue, right? Yeah. How many cars go past a single pump in 45 minutes while one electric car gets charged?
I just saw a story on this, Bill, where they said that Europeans have it better than Americans in a sense because Americans are not willing to accept short-range electric cars. But in order to be able to have that charging capacity where you can charge up and then go and then charge up and then go, you've got to have a much more built-out infrastructure with a lot of charging stations and quick charging times, which means you can't have trips that are as long as Americans demand because they're used to good, delicious gasoline.
Well, not only that, but look at Europe. Germany has 80 million people and is the size of Oregon and Washington combined. Short trips make a lot of sense in Germany. England is the size of Illinois, and they've got 50 million people. There's just it's a different geography. It's a more compact geography, and what works there doesn't necessarily work here. Same with high-speed rail.
It's a good urban solution, right? Because you don't have to travel distances that outrange your battery capability for the day. You've got a lot of congestion. They're quieter. They're cleaner. Although I have to tell you, given the advances in actual pollution control, not talking about carbon dioxide, but the air that goes into my Camaros, air comes out of it, it's practically cleaner than the air that went into it, right? I mean, they've really done amazing things in terms of actual pollutants. But yes, this once again is our intellectual elites in the cities, the urban elites telling us that everybody has to adopt the things that they like because they're useful in cities and they're expensive and you charge them at home. Now, I saw a senator ask Department of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, said, is charging your car more, does it use more electricity than running your refrigerator? And he said, yes. And he said, do you know how much more expensive it is than running your refrigerator? And Buttigieg said, yes. And then the senator said, is it in fact 40 times more electrically, the demand is 40 times what your refrigerator is? And Buttigieg says, yes. So there's this idea that once you put down the $100,000 for the electric car, everything's free after that, right? First of all, if you're going to charge it at home, that's where most of the charging happens. Yeah. Your electric bill is going to go way up. Your electric bill, by the way, is also going to go up whether you have an electric car or not, because as they continue to tighten the grip on fossil fuels, we used to export those a few years ago. When Donald Trump was president, we were an oil exporter, which blew my mind. So not only are you going to be using a lot more electricity, the electricity is going to be getting more expensive as well. And this is the perfect example of what is wrong with left-wingers and left-wing politics, right? They can't just take a good idea or even a good idea that works for them. They have to virtue signal by forcing the entire country, coercively in the state of California, certainly, to live by their own standards. And if it turns out you live in the country and you have to stop for 3 or 4 hours on a 2-hour drive in order to charge your car, then they don't care, right? They don't care. So this is madness, is what it is. And I'm glad to hear that somebody's speaking up. But the real issue here, Scott, is why is a company that makes cars afraid to come out and say we would like to continue to make gasoline-powered cars? What is so terrifying about that? And we all know the answer.
Yeah, and this is what Akio Toyoda is saying. And of course, he's speaking on behalf of people who aren't speaking, so he gets the benefit of the doubt that he's accurately expressing things that are thought by people who are afraid to speak, allegedly afraid to speak anyway. Stephen Green, it's interesting because Toyota's not saying we shouldn't develop electric cars. In fact, they think by the year 2030, they're going to spend something like $35 billion in the process of developing more electric vehicles. He just says that they should diversify gasoline engines, hybrid engines, electric vehicles, and hydrogen models. He said, and this is a quote from Akio Toyoda, he said, because the right answer is still unclear, we shouldn't limit ourselves to just one option. And he points out that the infrastructure for charging, as Bill was talking about, is lacking at this point, that it's a really high build cost right now, not the least of which is the cost of developing and building these batteries, and that you shouldn't narrow down your focus too quickly. And then he puts a thing in there that I think should cause every progressive heart to go pitter-patter, his concern for people in rural areas. He said, look, customers in rural areas or developing countries could be left behind in an all-electric vehicle world. If you get none of the major car makers or any more willing to serve those markets because of the pressure they feel externally or internally, or from their shareholders or politicians, then you may wind up with people in rural areas in developing countries who just can't get around because they can't buy the transportation.
It's more than just electric vehicles. I'm glad you asked me this because I'd totally forgotten this until you set up your question there at the end, Scott. Joe Biden, the alleged president, announced, the great fanfare last week that we were going to give $8 billion that, we don't have to South Africa to get them to shut off their coal plants. And I can tell you exactly what's going to happen because South Africa is a pretty corrupt country. They're going to piss away the $8 billion pretty quickly, and they're going to be left with unreliable intermittent electricity, which is going to take a poor, corrupt country, and it's going to inflict even more harm on South Africans than their own government already does. And we are bribing them. We are bribing them to be even worse to their own people. And this is a point of pride.
France just fired up a couple of dozen nuclear plants that they had chilled because of, concerns about nuclear power or whatever. But now that they have an energy shortage, they've put those nuclear power plants back online.
Good for them.
This is why climate change is the duct tape of left-wing politics. You can stick it to anything and it'll stop moving. That's exactly what this is. It is when it was global warming. They had a case for global warming, and when their models and the evidence wasn't strong enough, they had to change it to climate change. So if things get warmer, it's because we're burning fossil fuels. If they get colder, it's because we're burning fossil fuels, and on and on and on. But if you just sit back for a minute and just think about gasoline as if you'd never seen it before, and let's say you had an all-electric economy, and somebody said, "Well, there's this stuff called gasoline. We think maybe we might want to try this." Really? Yeah. So does it must require billions of dollars of rare materials in order to get a hold of this so-called gasoline, right? No, it's just under the ground. We just dig a hole. We just basically put a pipe down there and out it comes. Well, how do you transport this thing? Just another pipe. And when it comes out of the pipe, you put a match to it, catches fire. That's the energy density of this fluid. It's pumpable, it's transmittable, it's storable. Well, to store it, you must have some kind of you need some sort of cryogenic system to keep the thing. No, you just put it in a can, put it in a paint can, right? And if you were to present it that way, people would begin to appreciate just how amazing this stuff is.
The flip side,
and we've been told.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And we've been told that we're going to run out of it forever. But when Donald Trump was president and we were allowed to develop our own resources, there was more oil available in 2018 than there was when the first oil was drilled back in Pennsylvania in the end of the 1800s. We can get more oil out of the ground now than we could then. We've exhausted all of the easily obtainable, tap a hole in the ground, it comes gushing out. But because we don't stand still, at least we used to not stand still, technology has meant that we can get more of this stuff than we have ever been able to get before, ever. And this is a real problem for the people who want to shut down capitalism.
The flip side of that, though, is I want to talk about this diversity, though, because I think it is important because I'm a capitalist and I believe in freedom of choice, consumers spending with their pocketbooks. Or voting with their pocketbooks. If I still lived in San Francisco, I would want the tiniest EV you could possibly get, something big enough to get me to the grocery store and back, because I've carried groceries on the bus, on the Muni, and it sucks. So just give me my little smart car with a battery, and I'll zoom up to the grocery store, zoom back, and I'll be fine. And also, I can find a place to park the damn thing. I used to park illegally outside the Daly City BART station in a residential area that I found. And once a week or two when I needed my car, I'd take the BART down to Daly City, get my truck, do my shopping. It's just parking's expensive and difficult in San Francisco. So I get the tiniest little EV I can. But I don't live in San Francisco anymore. I live in the exurbs. I live where it's cold. I live where it's hilly. I've got 2 dogs and 3 kids and a home that requires a lot of trips to Home Depot. I've got I need cargo volume. I need to be able to tow stuff.
Pulling power.
Exactly. I don't know if you read this, but a couple of guys spent big money on Ford's new EV truck. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's the electric F-150 Lightning or whatever they call it. Well, they found out that if you try and tow something, you don't get any range out of the thing. Their 300-plus mile range turned into like 80 miles or something. And they got a big blog post out of that was fun to read. And now that the weather's...
You call it the Ford Daffodil.
And now that the weather's turned cold, their range range has been cut in half again, because God forbid you turn on the heater or try to drive in the cold, because cold kills batteries. The battery has to work harder, has to use more of its own energy to put the same amount of energy to your wheels. So if you're a contractor, if you live in the burbs or the exurbs, if you have a farm, oh God, they're trying to make our farms electric, and they're probably going to do it. Yeah. And you can't run a farm without diesel. You just can't do it. The whole thing, this whole mock save the environment movement is about one thing. It's about limiting choices in order to make us poorer and more dependent. And that's it.
The circulatory system of this country and this economy are the highways that run through it, and the trucks are the red blood cells of the corpuscles. Yeah. Trucks are what carries everything to where it needs to go. And they go long distances hauling huge loads, and they are working by the hour, right? They're working on the mile per hour. They've got it. The more distance they can travel in the smallest amount of time, the more money those people make, and the faster what you want to be there gets there. So what about all of this stuff? This is once again, it's this cocktail party philosophy being enforced upon the people that make cocktail parties possible.
It's why the Israeli experiment with electric vehicles with swappable batteries is probably more promising than anything we're seeing in the U.S. Because
standardized
if you could pull your car in and basically drop the battery and pick up another one and take off while they recharge it, if you could make it modular like that, then it's like me going out and buying a package full of D-cells to slap in my AM/FM radio. So I want to bring this to a close with just a really short observation. The whole reason I brought this story up is because I thought it was bold of Akio Toyoda to stand up and say something that apparently others are afraid to say, but certainly he's in a position to do so. He's not some fringe character in the industry. Toyota has been a leader for a long time, and their headquarters is not far from my house. Their North American headquarters is not far from my house here in Texas. But I thought, here we see, on the one side, politicians and activists who are basically trying to push a storyline and cow everyone else into silence, and intimidating people who do not wish to buy into the storyline. And then on the other side, we have people like Akio Toyoda and people who apparently are not yet bold enough to speak out, who are manufacturing automobiles. And when it comes down to a question of who you're going to believe, people who say things or people who do things, I'm going to go with the people who do things almost every time. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.